Yo guys, what is up? It's Teach here, coming at you again with another video over on Ark Survival Ascended, and I wanted to show you advanced turret tricks. Now, if you haven't watched my basic turret tricks video, that'll kind of lead you up to this where you need to know more of some of the advanced stuff, but this is going to show you a whole bunch of tips and tricks in order to place your turrets in an effective manner where in PvP you will not have to worry about them nearly as much. So I'm going to talk about everything advanced wise, including damage sources, how far they shoot, all kinds of stuff. We're going to go ahead and start from the very beginning. If you don't mind, smash that like button, leave a comment below for the algorithm, and then consider subbing to the channel. It helps out a ton. All right. Anyways, so in Ark Survival Ascended, as of right now, there are a total of 4 different types of turrets. You have your tech turret, you have your auto turret, your heavy, and your plant species X. If you are a endgame PvPer, you probably are mostly using heavy autos and then tech turrets. And you have a few of your plant species X in there. The proper ratio, by the way, for end game turrets, because you're capped at having 100 turrets in range, and you can check that by hitting H, and you can also just see when you place something down. If you hold E on it, you'll see turrets in range, right? You can also just see that when you walk up, you'll see turrets in range 4 out of 100. But in order to compensate for that, because you're only allowed to put 100 in range, typically there's a rule of 80-20 or 80-15-5. So what that means is you want at least 80%, if possible, of your turrets to be tech turrets, because they can carry the most bullets overall at 5,000 element shards. They do the most damage by a significant chunk, just so you can see on an unshielded Rex right there, there's 750 damage a shot, whereas the heavy auto turret only does 531 a shot, and they both fire at the exact same rate, so the most damage output goes to the tech turret. However, because of the splash damage, tech turrets are also going to damage riders, so basically this is going to allow you to prevent certain things from raiding you, and you want to definitely avoid that for sure. So 80% of your turrets, if possible, right, because this is an endgame thing where you need to run a ton of bosses in order to get the shards. So an endgame thing, 80% of your turrets should be tech turrets, and then you want the 20% to be heavies, or 15% to be heavies, and then 5% to be plant species X. Now, why would you want to add in plant species X? And the answer is actually pretty simple. Because plant species X does a slow, it's going to prevent people from getting super close to your turrets super quickly. It slows them by like 80%. So it's going to cause a huge slow, which is a big thing in endgame. Also, plant species X have an effect, unless it's been removed, I don't think it has, that it's actually more difficult for creatures to heal. It has reduced damage or reduced healing ability because it copies the Dilophosaur's drain, or the spit, where it makes your stuff all super slow and green, so it's hard to see. That's what the plant species X does, and it gives you a huge boost. And I know it's kind of hard because people can take these out the easiest just by using catapults or cannons or something like that. However, plant species X, having just a few of them is a major base defense. So adding just 1, 2, 3 of these into your base for base defense is going to make such a big difference. You'll be blown away because people won't be able to actually super push you, which just means they're going to sprint at you full speed with some stegos and rexes behind them, and a few of them, it'll give you a couple extra seconds, which is a big thing inside of PvP, because offline rating's a major problem. Slowing people down just a little bit really screws with people's heads. So advanced tips would be like as much as you can, 80%, probably 15%, and then 5% for the plant species X. Now, that is the explanation of what the turrets do, how much damage they do, all that kind of stuff. However, the next thing that you need to worry about inside of placing your turrets down and things along those lines are your actual abilities to prevent people from using a rush on your turret, is what it's called. So something called LOS, right? LOS means line of sight. Your turrets need line of sight in order to shoot something. So just like this Rex, if it's visible, my turrets are going to see it and they're going to shoot at it. However, if something is hidden by something on the map, like a rock, for example, right? If my turret can't see a direct line of sight to it, and you can check this by going into first person mode, can you see your turrets? If you can't, the turrets can't see you. Even if you're at the tippy top of this rock, right, and I can half see my turrets, the turrets cannot technically see me here because they have to be able to see my center of mass. Now, obviously I can see the turrets, but they can't see me. So this can be quite dangerous. So you want to prevent as much line of sight as possible. When you are going through all of your stuff, the line of sight for your turrets is going to hit the center of mass. So I want to remove rocks like this, and I want to make it so people have to push a giant flat space in order to get to me, because if they don't have to put a flash or push through a flat space, they can use that rock as cover and get even closer to your turrets. And the closer someone gets to your base, the more dangerous it is, right? So that's kind of explaining what LOS is. Now, how people really screw up LOS is they'll place down foundations and they'll raise those foundations, because though, yes, a raised foundation will prevent someone from just sprinting at your base, if I am smart at PvP and I see turrets on the ground, I'm just going to lay down, and those turrets are not going to be able to shoot me, and I can get insanely close to your base. And some people are not very good when they place their spam, and they place a whole bunch of foundation spam like this, and they just rotate it and raise it, which this is going to allow me to just use all of this foundation spam to get closer and closer to your base, close enough to the point where I can probably get to right about here and start rocketing your base, which is a big problem, obviously. Now, you can see that those foundations will be helpful because they're going to make me have to like move to the side in order to get closer to your base. But you want to try and place your foundation spam, not necessarily so people get blocked by it, but you want to place down things so they're in the ground so people can't push their turrets to you. So you can see how I've placed that one. Yes, I can walk over the top of it. However, I can't use that to block turret bullets. If you really want to block somebody, what you do is there's a little strategy that you can take and create, and that is this guy right here. So basically you can raise one side of this, right? And you create a step. Now, what I mean when I say step, I mean this literally. So yes, it's going to cost me a little bit because I'm going to technically block some of my turrets, but basically I'm creating a step. So someone has to think about how they come up my base. So again, generic things, do not block your line of sight for your turrets, because it's going to allow somebody to actually get closer and closer to your base, and that's not good. So how can we prevent blocking line of sight? There's a few things that you can compensate for, right? Even though the best place to place turrets is on the ground, we can raise them up in the sky. Now, some of the best things that you can do, pillars right now are incredibly powerful. Because of the sideways based pillars, these things are very nice. So you can build turret towers that are entirely built out of pillars, and it will have a very nice amount of defense, because you can build these like gargantuan network of structures just like this right here that will allow you to defend your base very well. And it's also going to let you place turrets on top of them, just like this. Excuse me, I had to cough. It'll allow you to place a turret up on top, which will be able to shoot down and over your blocked stuff. So having turrets up in the sky, you don't want too many up high, but you want a few of them up high, because these will allow you to basically prevent some line of sight issues where you're placing spam down and stuff like that. Having a few up high is important, but the reason you want to avoid having too many up high is because someone can shoot cannons at your base from a ways away, like right at like outside of turret range, and hit these. And what'll happen is if they start hitting the structure, it's actually going to take the turret down. So the reason we want to avoid that at all costs is because the more turrets you lose, the more rateable your base is. So the more turrets that you can place on the ground or on mesh means that if I'm placing a turret on something that cannot be broken, for example, this rock is a very large rock, right? This cannot be a harvested rock. I can place things on the side of this rock or upside down on this rock, meaning that everyone is going to, instead of being able to break a wall and taking out a ton of turrets, or if I have what's called a turret tower and have something like this, right, where I've got like 20 turrets on this thing, what I want to avoid is that I want to prevent people from being able to take out all those turrets just by taking out this pillar. So I'll show you what I mean by that, right? Basically, I have these two turrets over here. These are going to fire individually until someone comes up and destroys each of these turrets. They can't do anything to destroy both of the turrets at the same time, because these two turrets are attached to the mesh, which means they have to be taken out by actually going up to the turret and blowing it up. Now, these turrets, if someone was to cannon from a distance or get C4 down to the bottom of this, right? There's my turrets right there. If they blow up this bottom metal pillar, they blow up that entire structure and I lose all of my turrets. And that's not great. So that means 5 turrets versus just losing 1 on the ground. So the more turrets that you can place on the mesh, like I have done right here, the better off I am. All right, so hopefully that makes sense why mesh is better than just building giant turret towers, because smart people will just take your entire turret tower down and you got big problems. Now, it is true, however, that if you have a ton of turrets on one big tower, it is very difficult to rate it. So if I've got a 20 tall tower and I've got 100 turrets on it, yeah, it's going to be scary. However, a smart person is just going to do what they can to hit the bottom of that tower to try and bring the entire thing down, and then only have to work on 1 or 2 turrets. So basically all I'm trying to say with that statement is you want different line of sights, LOS, like we talked about earlier. I want to be able to have a turret fire from over there and from over here, because the more angles that I have to compensate for as a raider, the more difficult it is for me, because I might be like, okay, I finally got rid of this turret, and as soon as I move to my right, boom, another turret starts firing at me. I don't want to be able to soak everything just by standing in one spot, because if I'm soaking everything in one spot, I can just back up and move forwards and soak the wall, back up, move forward, soak the wall. You want to basically have multiple angles in multiple ways somebody has to raid your base. And by that, I mean that, so if I've got a turret here and a turret there and a turret up high, all 3 of those are going to shoot at different times slightly in order to compensate. Now, some people are like, well, that means you're only going to do 1 turret damage at a time. If someone's going to raid your base 1 turret at a time and you have capped turrets, it's going to take them over 4 days to raid your base. So people aren't going to do that. It's just going to frustrate them. And the more you can frustrate offline raiders, the better you are. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Now, all of that being said, those are all of your damages, right? So just to give you some kind of like small wrap-ups of some of the stuff we've talked about. Tech turrets have the largest foundation by about, or range by about a foundation. They can shoot technically 21 foundations, whereas a heavy auto can only shoot about 20 foundations. So a lot of times your tech turrets are going to start firing before your heavy auto turrets do. So keep that in mind. Now, same thing with your, Plant Species X. Plant Species X, for some reason, have a slightly higher range. If placed at the exact distance of a heavy auto turret and a tech turret, sometimes, most of the time, the Plant Species X is going to start firing first. So if you can, you want to place them back just a little bit, like a half foundation, and that will give you some compensation for that Plant Species X to fire. So all of those are the ranges that you're going to focus on. Now, the next thing that we're going to talk about is actually how to arm your turrets and what you want to set them for. So you always want the range on high. Reason being is if it's on medium, people can get really close to your base. And if it's on low, there's not even a point of having turrets at that point in time. You pretty much always want it on high. There are a few cases where you'd want it on medium, but nothing that we're going to worry about in this video. So always have them on high. And the next thing you want to focus on is this right here. Close and what kind of targeting we want, right? All of these targets are useful. You want to, if you're playing true PvP, you want to individually pin your turrets, which means you're going to set them up for an individual situation. If I have a turret and it's focused on all targets, that's a waste. Never have a turret on all targets. You want to have each turret focused on individual things. Your tech turrets should almost always be focused on only survivors. The reason this is the case is because we want to be able to shoot the survivors off of things like stegos. And when your tech turret aims at the actual front of a stego, it's going to do splash damage to the rider, and the rider will eventually be killed. Whereas if it's only on survivors and tamed creatures, it's going to shoot at the stego itself instead of the rider, so there's going to be 0 splash damage. So you want to aim, I'd say, at least 80% of your tech turrets on only survivors, and then 20% of them on only survivors and tamed, so you're still doing that split damage. So that's how you want to focus your tech turrets. Now with your heavy auto turrets, there's 3 settings you want to focus on. 1, you want someone only survivors in case someone tries to sprint at your base. You want like maybe 5% of them on only survivors. The next thing you want to do is you're going to put 1 or 2, no more than 1 or 2 heavy auto turrets on only wild creatures. Now, there is a reason that we're doing this, because what'll happen is someone will soak all of your heavy turrets, and then your tech turrets are going to shoot for quite a bit longer. So instead, they're going to think, oh man, I can just shoot this person's base with rockets, because tech turrets do not shoot rockets out of the sky where heavy turrets do. Having 1 or 2 of your heavy auto turrets on only wild creatures will create an area of effect, allowing these turrets to shoot rockets out of the sky, even though it appears like your base is out of bullets, making it much harder to raid your base. But you only want 1 or 2 turrets set this way. And the rest of your turrets should be set to only survivors or tamed creatures, because these turrets will do headshot damage at a higher rate than a shot to the only survivors on a stego or something like that. So you want to make sure that these, most of your turrets are going to be on this. So have like 10% here, 1 or 2 on only wilds, and the rest of your heavies on only survivors or tamed. Now, as for these guys, right? This is one of those rare exceptions. You have two options for plant species X. You can either set them to all targets, which is not a bad idea if you have a few of them, or just leave all of them on only survivors or tamed creatures. Now what that's going to mean is that your plants are going to shoot everything that is enemy, and that's a good thing because we want them, because it's so cheap to maintain a large crop plot with a plant species X inside of it, that we just want to make sure they're always shooting. So the more fertilizer you have, the better off you are with these, and they can just shoot a ton. So that is how all of that. Now the last setting that I'm going to talk about in this advanced tutorial, right, is that there are a few things that we can change inside of turrets now. This is a new setting inside of Ark Survival Ascended, and that's your targeting options. You want to exclude and include on an individual turret basis, by the way, individual turrets. You want to be able to include and exclude classes. So notice how I've got a trilobite and a rex nearby. If I go into exclude list, what that means is that my turrets are not going to shoot that thing. So if I'm going to go to that, I want to say, okay, I want to exclude the shooting of rexes. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is if I turn this on, this turret is no longer going to shoot rexes, whereas this one will. Now that's a huge advantage because sometimes people are going to launch random tames at your base and you want specific turrets to only fire at specific things. So what I might do is I might turn my heavy auto turrets and remove Carbonemus from them, because Carbonemus will be thrown at your base. Heavy auto turrets are just going to waste their bullets because they don't really do damage to Carbonemus. So adding those to your exclude list is a massive game changer. So you should definitely do that. You can also, for example, like Rexes, you can leave your one or two of your tech turrets on exclude stegos. So when someone tries to push you with a stego and a rex, these tech turrets are going to shoot the rexes, which is going to give you a huge advantage in PvP. So these lists are very, very valuable. So when I say set your targeting options, make sure you're thinking about the different types of ways that people raid. Some of the most common being a couple of stegos with a rex with a tech saddle on it and just shooting your base. So if you have a few of your turrets on exclude stegos, guess what? That rex is getting annihilated. If you have a few of your heavy autos, you should almost have all of your heavy autos on exclude Carbonemus. That means that all of the Carbonemus aren't going to soak your heavy auto turrets. Now, these are all really, really advanced things, and you kind of need to think about it because who is raiding you and what are they raiding you with? So those are the major things that you can do. And all of those, I know this is a longer video, so I'm sorry, but those are all really, really advanced things. Now, some of the things that you can place turrets on, this will be the last thing I kind of talk about that has changed since the past, is I can now use a foundation, and then off of a foundation, if I go ahead and I can place a actual railing, you see it right here, right? You can place turrets on railings like this, and you can kind of get these railings going pretty high, and you can get some weird structures created because turrets can technically be placed up on top of these to prevent line of sight. However, this can also be shot, so keep that in mind. So those are very valuable things to place them on. Other things that you can use that are very useful is the actual uses of this right here. You can only place one, just so you're aware, but these are fence foundations. You can place turrets on top and on the side of fence foundations now. So that can be very useful to give your turret just a little bit of raised off the ground, which is a huge advantage for PvP to get it raised just a touch off the ground. So someone's gonna have to damage that foundation before getting to the turret. And then the last thing that's a big change is you are now able on any part of your, just so you can see it right here, gateways, you can place turrets. So if you have some tech gateways that are much harder to destroy, you can place turrets on top of, on the side of, and shooting from underneath. Let's see if I can get a cool angle here, just like this. So you have multiple angles where it's very difficult to raid something like this. You don't want to put much more than like 5 turrets on one of these though, because if someone gets close enough to your base, tech structures take increased damage from tech rifles and tech rexes. But you can see that having a little bit of elevation is a major difference just to be able to put those turrets up in the air. So definitely consider using that as a strategy. And then one additional thing, this is underused in PvP, just so someone can't run up and use C4 on your stuff. What you can do is actually spike walls will snap now to these structures and to these foundations. Come on, let me place this. Really, you're not gonna let me place? Whatever. But you see the point. You can throw up some spike walls, and it's going to make it difficult for people to get close to your stuff. And that's the important part, because the more difficult I can make this, the better off I am. So you can actually place some pretty crazy structure foundations and structures just like this in order to prevent people from shooting. Also, if you really wanted to, you can place some turrets on top of spike structures, which is really neat. That's a new thing they just added. However, because spike structures take basically one rocket and they get destroyed, it's not super useful. So anyways, this is some pretty advanced tips. I know this is a ton of stuff. It's 20 minutes of stuff, but all of it should be helpful to you. So hopefully this video helped you out. And if you don't mind, smash that like button, leave a comment below for the algorithm, and then consider subbing to the channel. All right, teach.